In Rustbrook, the villagers gathered in the central square, a rare sight of camaraderie and celebration filling the air. Torches flickered in the twilight, casting warm glows over the rough-hewn tables laden with simple yet hearty fare. The scent of roasted meat mingled with the earthy aroma of freshly baked bread, while laughter and the clinking of tin cups echoed through the makeshift village. Silas Kane stood near one of the tables, his rugged appearance softened by the welcoming atmosphere. His eyes scanned the gathering, noting how different Rustbrook seemed in this light. Gone were the wary glances and tight-lipped suspicion. Instead, faces now wore expressions of gratitude and cautious relief. Trapper Reed approached Silas, a broad smile on his face. "Looks like we did good, Kane. Folks here are real thankful." Silas nodded, a rare smile tugging at his lips. It was a team effort. Miriam, one of the village elders, raised her cup and called for attention. The conversations died down as all eyes turned to her. "Tonight, we celebrate not just our survival but our unity," she began. "We owe a great deal to Silas Kane and his team for their bravery and skill." A cheer erupted from the crowd, followed by a chorus of raised cups. Silas inclined his head slightly in acknowledgement. "Silas," Miriam continued, gesturing for him to step forward, "would you say a few words?" He hesitated for a moment before stepping into the circle of light cast by the torches. His voice was steady as he spoke. "I'm honored to stand here among you all. What we accomplished wasn't just about supplies or defense, it was about trust and cooperation." He glanced around at the faces watching him. "Rustbrook has shown me that even in times like these, there's still hope." Another round of cheers followed his words. As the evening wore on, Silas found himself moving among the villagers more freely than he had since his arrival. Conversations flowed easily now, no longer burdened by suspicion. Briggs clapped Silas on the back as they passed by one another near the food tables. "Good to see you finally relaxing a bit," Silas chuckled. "Don't get used to it." Lex approached with a grin, holding out a cup filled with some kind of homemade brew. "To successful missions and unexpected allies," she toasted. Silas accepted the drink and clinked cups with her. "To Rustbrook," he replied. The night continued with music played on old instruments and stories shared around small fires. Silas listened intently as villagers recounted tales of their own struggles and victories. For a brief moment in time, Rustbrook felt less like a fortress against an unforgiving world and more like a beacon of resilience and community. And for Silas Kane, that was enough to make this place feel almost like home, even if just for tonight.
The fires burned lower as the night thinned. Laughter softened into smaller circles of conversation. Tin cups clinked less often. Music faded into memory. Silas stepped away from the square and walked toward the outer barricade where the torches gave way to darkness. Beyond the wooden spikes and scrap metal plating, the wasteland stretched endless and indifferent. Burke stood there already. Arms folded. Back rigid. "You move fast," Burke said without turning. Silas stopped beside him. "Didn't expect to stay." That's the problem. Wind dragged sand against the outer wall with a dry scraping sound. Fraction X didn't know this place, Burke continued. Now they will. They were expanding, Silas replied calmly. It was only a matter of time. Burke finally looked at him. Maybe. But now it's personal. Silas didn't argue. Inside the village, someone laughed loudly. The sound felt fragile out here. You survived them, Burke said. Men who walk out of places like that don't come alone. They bring consequences. Silas studied the dark horizon. You want me gone. I want Rustbrook standing in a year. A pause. And I don't know if that happens with you here. The words weren't angry. Just honest. Silas nodded once. It will be stronger. Or it will burn. Burke stepped closer. If this place burns, Kane. I won't forget who brought the fire. He walked back toward the square without waiting for a reply. Silas remained at the barricade. The celebration behind him. The wasteland ahead. Silas didn't sleep. He stood outside the barricade long after the fires burned low. The wasteland was quiet. Too quiet. Then, a vibration. Not sound. Not wind. A low, steady hum. He felt it first in his teeth, then behind his eyes. He turned toward White City. The pale glow on the horizon flickered. Just once. Flat. Measured. Like something adjusting. Silas's chest tightened. The tone shifted slightly higher. Recalibrating. The same frequency. The same precision. It knows I'm here. The glow stabilized. The hum faded. Silas stood alone in the dark. Rustbrook slept. White City didn't.
In Rustbrook, the hum of activity buzzed through the village. Men and women labored at the makeshift defenses, hammering metal plates into place and reinforcing wooden barricades. Watchtowers, cobbled together from salvaged materials, rose above the perimeter, manned by vigilant guards scanning the horizon. Nearby, a group of villagers trained in combat techniques under Trapper Reed's watchful eye. The sound of wooden practice swords clashing echoed across the clearing as Trapper barked instructions. Keep your guard up, move your feet. He corrected stances and demonstrated maneuvers with practiced ease. Further into the village, others tended to the crops, carefully nurturing what little sustenance they could coax from the barren soil. Bent over rows of vegetables, they worked methodically, their faces lined with determination and hope. Inside the central meeting hall, Silas Kane sat across from Rustbrook's elders. The room was dimly lit by lanterns, casting flickering shadows on the rough walls. Trapper stood nearby, arms crossed as he listened intently. Elder Miriam cleared her throat, drawing everyone's attention. Silas, she began, her voice steady but grave, we have more to discuss than just Fraction X. Silas leaned forward slightly, his expression intent. What is it? Miriam exchanged a glance with the other elders before continuing. We've received reports of another force stirring in the region. They're unidentified but have been seen deploying mech patrols. Trapper's eyes narrowed. Mechs? That's a whole new level of threat. Elder Tomas nodded. Indeed, one of our trade posts was recently taken out by these patrols. The survivors described heavily armored units unlike anything we've seen. Silas felt a knot tighten in his stomach. Do we know where they're coming from? Not yet, Elder Miriam admitted. Our scouts are still gathering information. But it's clear they're organized and well equipped. Trapper spoke up, his tone serious. If they've got mechs, they're not just scavengers or raiders. This is something bigger. Silas considered this new information carefully. We need to prepare for all possibilities, he said finally. Strengthen our defenses further and train everyone to handle these new threats. The elders nodded in agreement, their faces etched with concern but also resolve. Silas, Elder Tomas added, we'll need your expertise more than ever now. Silas met his gaze firmly. You have it. With that understanding established, they turned their focus to planning and strategy, knowing that Rustbrook's survival depended on their collective strength and vigilance in the face of growing dangers both known and unknown. Silas stood, nodding to the elders. All right, let's get to work. We need to reinforce our defenses, train our people, and put small recon teams out there. We do what we can with what we have. Trapper moved to a large map pinned to the wall, pointing at various locations around Rustbrook. We've identified several key points that need immediate fortification. We'll start here, he indicated a vulnerable section near the southern perimeter. Elder Miriam added, and don't forget the northern approach. It's less fortified but equally critical. Silas turned to the gathered villagers. Everyone who can wield a weapon or help with building defenses needs to be involved. Training starts immediately. Trapper nodded in agreement. I'll lead the training sessions and organize patrols.
Training looked clean from a distance. From far away, it was lines. Discipline. People moving with purpose. Up close, it was bruises. It was fear disguised as instruction. Silas crossed the clearing where Trapper had been drilling villagers since dawn. The sun was already high, heat pressing down like a hand. A ring of onlookers stood around the sparring yard, men and women gripping scrap blades and patched rifles like they were trying to convince themselves those objects meant safety. Trapper barked an order. Again. 2 trainees collided, clumsy. One slipped in the dirt. The other swung too wide. And the scrap blade caught flesh. A sharp sound. A gasp. Blood spilled onto dust. The clearing went silent. The injured woman dropped to her knees, clutching her forearm, eyes wide like she couldn't understand how quickly training turned into harm. Someone rushed forward. Someone swore. Silas stepped in before panic could become a stampede. "Hold," he said, voice controlled. It wasn't loud, but it cut through the noise like a blade. People froze. He crouched beside the woman and inspected the wound. Not deep, but messy. Dirty metal. Infection could kill faster than bullets out here. "Get clean water," he said, not asking. Now. A teenager sprinted toward the well. Trapper moved closer, jaw tight. "My fault." Silas looked up at him. "No. It's the cost." Trapper's eyes hardened. "They're not ready." "They won't ever be ready," Silas said quietly. "They'll just be less unready." The woman's breathing trembled. Silas took a strip of cloth, pressed it to the cut, and held it firm. "Listen to me," he said to her, calm and direct. "You're not dying here. But you're going to respect steel from now on." Her eyes flicked to him. And in that look Silas saw the truth of Rustbrook. These people weren't soldiers. They were survivors trying to become soldiers because the world had forced them. Silas stood and turned to the gathered trainees. "You want to live?" he asked, voice steady. No one answered. "You want Rustbrook to stand?" he pressed. A few nodded. "Then stop pretending training is safe," Silas said. "There's no safe version of what's coming." He pointed toward the perimeter. "Fraction X doesn't care if your hands shake," he said. "Mechs won't care if you're afraid." He let that sit. Then, softer, "But you can still learn to move anyway." Trapper exhaled, anger and respect mixing in his posture. Silas looked at him. "Double the med supplies on patrols. Blades stay dulled unless I say otherwise." Trapper nodded. "Understood." Silas watched the trainees regroup. Some looked terrified. Some looked angry. A few looked determined. Good. Determination was the only thing you could build out here that didn't rust. As Silas walked away, he heard Burke's voice from the edge of the clearing. Low. Bitter. This is what he brought. Silas didn't turn. Because Burke was right. And because the truth didn't care who spoke it. The cut didn't look like much. By morning, it looked worse. The woman from training, Mara, sat on a stool outside the infirmary hut, arm wrapped tight in cloth that had already soaked through. Silas stood in front of her. The skin around the wound was swollen. Angry red. Spreading. "You cleaned it?" he asked. Trapper nodded. "Boiled water. Herbs from Ilara's trade. Did everything right." Mara's breathing was shallow. "It burns," she whispered. Silas crouched. He knew that tone. Not pain. Poison. "You pushed them too fast," Burke said from behind him. Silas didn't turn. "Steel shouldn't touch skin that early." "We don't have time," Silas replied. Burke stepped closer. "Then we bury them faster." Silence. The infection line crawled up Mara's forearm like something alive. Silas stood slowly. "Cut it," he said. Trapper froze. "Silas?" "Now." Mara's eyes widened. "Better an arm than a grave," Silas said, voice steady. Burke stared at him. "Your training," Burke said quietly, "cost her that." Silas didn't answer. He didn't need to. Because Burke was right.
As they continued planning, Silas turned back to Elder Miriam. "You mentioned a trading post being attacked. Do you know their locations?" Miriam pointed to a spot on the map several miles from Rustbrook. "Here and here. These posts are vital for our trade routes and supplies." Silas considered the distances and terrain. "We need to send a team to warn them and recruit any able-bodied men they have. We need more manpower and materials." Trapper stepped forward again, his expression determined. "I'll take a team out there myself." Silas placed a hand on Trapper's shoulder, appreciating his readiness. "Good. Take whoever you need and move quickly but cautiously. We can't afford any more surprises." Miriam nodded in agreement, her eyes reflecting both worry and hope. "We'll do our part here, Silas. Rustbrook will be ready." As the meeting concluded, Silas and Trapper began assembling their teams, each member understanding the urgency of their mission. The village buzzed with activity as everyone prepared for what lay ahead. Silas addressed his team one final time before they set off for the trading posts. "Stay alert and stick together. We bring back anyone willing to fight or help us build up our defenses." Trapper checked his gear, then turned to Silas with a resolute nod. "Let's move out." With that, they headed into the wasteland towards the trading posts, knowing that every moment counted in their fight for survival and preparation against whatever threats lay ahead. In Rustbrook, villagers worked tirelessly under Elder Miriam's guidance, reinforcing barricades and sharpening their combat skills under Trapper's direction when he wasn't on mission. The combined efforts of training within Rustbrook and outreach missions aimed at strengthening alliances marked a pivotal moment in their struggle for survival against mounting threats. Silas led his team through the rugged terrain toward the trading posts. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows over the wasteland. Among his group were seasoned traders and former scavengers, their faces etched with experience and determination. As they approached the first trading post, a small settlement surrounded by makeshift defenses, Silas signaled his team to stay alert but relaxed. They entered the post, where wary eyes tracked their every move. After noon, Silas greeted the traders, displaying an open palm to show he meant no harm. "We're from Rustbrook, looking to trade and share some important news." The head trader, a burly man with a grizzled beard named Bartok, stepped forward. "Rustbrook, what brings you out here?" "Need supplies and have some information to share," Silas replied. "Might be in your interest to hear us out." Bartok eyed him cautiously but nodded. "All right. Let's see what you got." Silas motioned to Trapper and the others, who began unloading various goods they had brought for trade, ammunition, tools, and foodstuffs. As they haggled and exchanged items, the atmosphere grew more cordial. One of the traders, a lean woman named Alara, handed Silas a small bag of dried herbs. "Good for pain relief," she said with a smile. Silas nodded his thanks. "Appreciate it. Now, about that information," Bartok crossed his arms. "Go on." Silas took a deep breath. "Fraction X is on the move. They've been hitting settlements and trading posts like yours." Murmurs of concern spread through the traders. "We barely made it out alive," Trapper added. "Rustbrook's fortifying its defenses, and we need all the help we can get." Alara frowned. "And what do you propose?" Silas leaned in slightly. "Join us in Rustbrook. We can defend each other better together than apart." Bartok scratched his beard thoughtfully. "Strength in numbers, huh? What's Rustbrook got that we don't?" "A solid plan," Silas said firmly. "Training for combat, fortified defenses, and experienced fighters willing to stand against Fraction X." The traders exchanged glances before Bartok spoke again. "We'll need some convincing. Come see for yourselves," Trapper suggested. "Bring your best men and take a look at what we've built." Alara nodded slowly. "If it's as good as you say, we might consider it." Bartok extended his hand to Silas. "All right then, we'll send a few of our folks to check it out." Silas shook Bartok's hand firmly. "You won't regret it." With their trade completed, they moved on to the next post. Each stop followed a similar pattern, swift exchanges and cautious glances. Silas ensured their presence was brief yet efficient, knowing time was a luxury they couldn't afford. By midday, they reached the final trading post. This one was larger, more fortified. Silas felt a pang of unease but pushed it aside as they approached. "We need supplies," he stated, laying out their offerings. The head trader scrutinized them before agreeing to the exchange. As they loaded up on necessities, Silas's senses remained on high alert. Briggs noticed too and exchanged a meaningful look with him. "Almost done here," Briggs murmured. "Stay sharp," Silas replied. With the last of their trades completed, the team began their journey back to Rustbrook. The jeep hummed steadily beneath them as they navigated through the winding paths and open stretches of land. When Rustbrook came into view, relief washed over Silas briefly, until he saw Miriam waiting at the gates with a grim expression. "What's wrong?" he asked as soon as they stepped out of the vehicle. "We've been scouted," Miriam said tersely. "Mechs, no attack yet, but they were close." Silas clenched his jaw. "Everyone okay?" "For now," Miriam replied. "We need to be ready." Silas nodded and turned to his team. "Unload and prepare. We need everyone on high alert." Trapper moved quickly to help unload while Lex disappeared into the village to spread the word. Briggs stood guard at the gate alongside Doyle. Silas walked up to Miriam and met her gaze squarely. "We'll fortify our defenses." Miriam nodded slowly, determination hardening her features. "We must." As Silas watched his team work seamlessly together, a fierce resolve settled within him. They would protect Rustbrook, whatever it took. Silas leaned against the central meeting table, listening as the newcomers outlined their observations. Bartok, the head trader, pointed to a rough map of the region spread out before them. His finger tapped insistently on a mark labeled, "Old Prus Lookout." "It's abandoned, but still stands," Bartok said. "We used to avoid it, thinking it'd be swarming with raiders or worse. But if you can secure it, it's a perfect vantage point." Trapper nodded, a faint smile tugging at his scruffy beard. "I know that place. High ground, good sightlines. We could spot any approaching threats miles off." Silas narrowed his eyes, tracing the line from Rustbrook to the Old Prus Lookout with his gaze. "Are we sure it's abandoned?" he asked, skepticism edging his voice. "I've heard some of the old officers might still be holed up there." Bartok shrugged, the movement barely noticeable under his thick coat. "It's possible. We've seen no signs of activity, but then again, we've kept our distance. If those officers are still there," Trapper interjected, "recruiting them could give us a serious advantage. They know the terrain, have combat experience. We could use that." Miriam leaned forward, her silver hair catching the dim light. "It's worth investigating," she said. "But we need to approach carefully. If they're hostile or allied with Fraction X, it could backfire." Silas nodded in agreement. "We'll send a small team. Quiet and fast. If they're friendly, we negotiate. If not, we get out before they can alert anyone." Trapper smirked. "I know just the folks for this kind of job. Who do you have in mind?" Miriam asked. "Briggs and Lex," Trapper replied without hesitation. "They're our best scouts. Silent as shadows and quick thinkers." Miriam gave a curt nod. "Agreed. But Silas, I want you to lead them. Your experience with the White City and Fraction X makes you the best candidate." Silas didn't argue. He simply nodded and began planning the approach in his mind. Bartok added, "If you manage to recruit those officers, we might have a chance to turn the tide against Fraction X's advances." Trapper slapped Silas on the shoulder with a grin that softened his usually gruff demeanor. "Guess we're going hunting again." Silas smirked back, though his eyes remained cold and calculating. "Let's hope it's a friendly hunt this time." They broke from their huddle, each moving with purpose towards their tasks. Bartok coordinating supplies, Miriam overseeing fortifications, and Trapper rounding up Briggs and Lex. The sense of urgency was palpable as Silas prepared for another trek into uncertainty. But this time, there was a flicker of hope that allies might be found rather than enemies. As Silas strapped on his gear and checked his weapons, he glanced back at Trapper one last time before heading out. "Ready, always?" Trapper's response was steady as they stepped into the cool evening air together. The path ahead was fraught with risks but potentially rich with rewards. A chance to bolster Rustbrook's defenses with experienced fighters if fortune favored them. Elder Miriam glanced between Silas and Trapper. "It's risky, but necessary." We need eyes on every possible approach. Another trader, a wiry woman named Marla, stepped forward. There's more we can do than just lookouts. We've got contacts, engineers who could help us build weapons and ammo. Maybe even reverse engineer some of the tech we've scavenged. Silas's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. Engineers could turn the tide. More firepower means we stand a better chance against Fraction X's mechs. Bartok leaned in closer to the map, his voice low but firm. We'll need to act fast. Get those engineers here and set up production before they strike again. Miriam nodded slowly. I'll send messengers to your contacts immediately. And we'll need volunteers to scout and secure that lookout. Miriam turned to Marla and Bartok. You two start drafting plans for the new defenses and weapons production with our current resources. The traders exchanged glances and nodded in agreement. Silas pushed off the table and moved towards the door, his mind already on the next steps. We leave at first light. Silas and his team, Trapper, Lex, and Briggs, set out from Rustbrook at dawn, joined by 2 guards, Carter and Nash. They moved on foot, careful and silent. The desert stretched before them, a barren expanse dotted with scraggly brush and rocky outcrops. Carter, you're on point, Silas ordered in a low voice. Nash, you take recon. Trapper, Lex, cover the flanks. The group fell into their roles seamlessly. Carter led the way with sharp eyes scanning for threats. Nash moved ahead and to the side, slipping through shadows like a wraith. Trapper took the right flank, his steps light despite his weather-beaten frame. Lex covered the left with silent precision, her knife belt secured and ready. Hours passed as they carefully made their way through the unforgiving landscape. The sun climbed higher, baking the earth beneath their feet. The team remained vigilant, every step calculated to avoid detection. A sudden motion in the distance made Silas raise his hand to halt. They dropped to the ground as a small raider party appeared over a dune, rough figures armed with makeshift weapons. Stay low, Silas whispered. The raiders moved closer but seemed unaware of the hidden team. Holding their breath, they waited until the group passed before continuing their journey. Just as they thought the path was clear, a strange shape appeared on the horizon. It wasn't a vehicle, it looked like a robot. Mech, Trapper hissed under his breath. The machine's sensors whirred as it noticed them. Without warning, it attacked. Spread out, Silas shouted. Laser fire cut through the air as the mech advanced. Silas dove for cover behind a boulder, returning fire with precision shots aimed at weak points in its armor. Briggs and Lex flanked it, taking shots at its joints to slow it down. Carter and Nash provided suppressing fire from behind cover. The mech's weapons were fierce, energy bolts exploded around them. Carter took a direct hit to the chest and fell without a sound. Nash tried to drag him back but was struck down by another blast. We've got to disable it, Trapper yelled over the chaos. Silas nodded grimly and aimed for its power core. His shot hit home, causing sparks to fly from its chestplate. The mech staggered but continued its assault. Briggs took another shot at its leg joint while Lex went for an exposed wire near its shoulder. The combined effort caused it to stumble and finally collapse in a heap of metal. Breathing heavily, Silas approached cautiously with Trapper by his side. They scavenged parts from the disabled mech.
The mech lay twisted in the dunes. Metal ticking. Sand still hissing where energy bolts had burned it black. Silas moved first to Carter. The armor had fused into his chest plate. The blast had been clean. Instant. No blood. Just heat. Nash lay several paces away, eyes open to the sky. Silas knelt and closed them. No speeches. No ceremony. Only wind. Lex stood over the machine's wreckage, staring. That wasn't random, she said quietly. Silas looked at her. It scanned us first, she continued. Adjusted its firing pattern. Briggs wiped grit from his face. That wasn't scavenged tech. Trapper crouched beside the exposed torso, peeling back cracked plating. Factory assembly, he muttered. Precision joints. Reinforced actuator lines. Silas stepped closer to the shattered core housing. The shot he had taken wasn't luck. He had aimed for a seam. But after first impact, the mech had shifted its armor distribution. Adapted. He felt it settle in his chest. Not fear. Recognition. This wasn't wasteland chaos, Silas said quietly. Trapper glanced up. This was deployed. Wind rolled across the dunes, covering Carter's boots with sand. Lex swallowed. If they're sending one, they'll send more, Silas finished. He stood slowly. Strip what we can. We bury them at the lookout. Briggs nodded once. No one argued. As they worked, the desert felt different. Not empty. Observed. And somewhere beyond the horizon, someone had just learned how they fought.